Occupation of Jersey 1940 to 45, Chapters 6 and 7. Life Goes On. We were informed by German order that we could write a message to our relatives in England, 25 words only, including their name and address, and must not mention anything of a military nature. We thought we could let them know we had no petrol, so we wrote, "Fowls roosting on the old van." Transport was now almost non-existent, only one bus into town twice daily, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Jack had managed to get two second-hand bicycles with solid tires. Jack's had a carrier on the front to carry David, so we were able to visit the family and friends. The farmers had to grow the crops the military command ordered, which were potatoes, wheats, oats, swedes, and any other vegetable you could. Food was very short now, and it was hard working in the fields, especially for the men. Easter 1941. Jack sublet part of Gladsmead and Mr. and Mrs. Reg Bunell. They were a very nice, quiet couple. They immigrated to Australia after the war with two of Mr. Bunell's brothers. One was the Reverend Bunell. The population were ordered to go to the Red Cross depot for vaccination against smallpox. Our Red Cross station was at the Congregational Church schoolroom, Sion. Later the same year, Jack's uncle, Jean Duval, advised him to apply for the job as State's milk inspector for our district. It was not highly paid, but ensured that we had money to pay for the rent. August 1941. I used to take David in his pushchair with a drink of milk in the flask and walk to the fields at Los Saint-Germain to help Jack tie the sheaves of corn and stand them up in stooks. We sometimes attended Congregational Church at Sion, where later on David started Sunday school. The minister, Reverend Corrin, was a great old Englishman. Sometimes he would ask the congregation to sing the national anthem as a hymn. At this time, Enid, Jack's sister, used to come and stay with us at the weekends, as she was working for the States as a speech therapist for the schools in the west of the island, and was too far to go home on her bike. Enid always brought her own rations with her, and sometimes left a little butter if she had any. On one occasion, when Enid was staying the night, we were awakened by the sound of heavy gunfire. Enid, who had been sleeping in the bedroom above us, came down to our room, and we all huddled together on our bed. There were a series of terrific explosions. As you can imagine, we had very little sleep that night. The next day, we discovered that an English plane had been fired on and had jettisoned 15 bombs in fields not far from our house. We had made friends with neighbours and were invited to go to their farm to help make black butter. This meant peeling apples for 2 days and staying up all night to help stir the bochet of apples, spices, etc. It was an experience and quite a lot of fun. Christmas again, but this year Frank and Eileen were unable to be with us, as Eileen's sister Doris had had 2 serious operations and Eileen was looking after her. Hedley, Madge and David came as usual, and I stuffed a large rabbit for our dinner. It was delicious, and once again we went into our precious store cupboards for a special treat. All our goodies were now kept for birthdays and Christmas. Chapter 7. The Germans make their presence felt. 1943. Twice in the early months an order was issued that all men of military age must pack a change of clothing in readiness for deportation to Alderney to work for the Germans. Fortunately, this order was never carried out. June. I think this is actually 1942, by the way, not 1943. June. Russian slave workers arrived in the island. It was pitiful to see the condition they were in, nothing on their feet except rags, and they were pushed along the streets by the German guards. Nearly 2 years under German occupation and still more orders, all wireless sets and cameras must be handed into our parish halls. Reprisals would be taken against anyone refusing to obey. 2 brothers, George and Bert Gallican, who lived at Roseland, St. Peter, printed a leaflet telling islanders to resist the order, and as it was against the Geneva Convention. The German authorities seized 12 men as hostages and put them in jail, and said unless the culprits gave themselves up, these men would be shot. The brothers destroyed equipment, etc. at Roselands, then gave themselves up. Then the hostages were released. Bert Gallican was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment in Germany, and George to 1 year in France. Both brothers luckily returned after the war. We did not know at that time that we would one day live at Roselands ourselves. September 1942. Eileen and I were walking past the evening post office in Bath Street. We saw people reading a notice in the window. It read, "All English-born residents with their families are to be deported to Germany." We were stunned. We didn't realize at first that it would affect Frank and Eileen and Gloria, but Frank was born in England and had come to Jersey when he was 5 years old. We were in a panic. It was already rumored that the first boat of deportees was sailing the next day. Jack and I talked to Frank and Eileen, and we decided that they should come to stay with us at Gladsmere, but because the Germans had to deliver to the summons to the householder personally, and if Frank and Eileen were not at their home, they would not receive the summons. People were being deported in alphabetical order. They stayed with us for a few days, but Frank had to cycle to town every day to go for his work, and the long journey back each evening was too much. So they returned to their home and suspected they would eventually be deported. Eileen and I went through our aunt's possessions and found some remnant of warm material, which Eileen took the dressmaker to have made up for her to wear on the journey. Bessie, Eileen's sister, gave some butter, sugar, and flour, and I went down to Eileen's home to make some scones for them to take with them. It was dreadful. Everyone was crying, not knowing if we would ever see them again. But by some great fortune they were spared, maybe because Marquand is an old Jersey name.